Good morning, everybody. We actually have been live for a few moments, and we certainly allow those who take the opportunity to meet and greet between this brief intermission, but that's okay. Um, I'm just going to recap what we talked about last week and pick up where we left off. But if you remember, we started on the block of being kind. And remember, we read a philosophical statement by Abraham Joshua Heschel that said, when I was young, I admired clever people. Now that I'm old, I admire kind people. Is that because we're old ourselves, or because of the lessons that we've learned, as Michael said in his message this morning, maturity? Maturity carries us to a level where we have a greater respect for the lessons that we've learned to get to that point in life. You remember we opened with these words that kindness can be hard work. For some, it comes easy. For others, it's a labor. Why do we need to be kind? Because it is needed. We live in a world that more often than not, we see uncivil behavior from people all around us. We as Christians, as citizens of God's kingdom, we need to be kind because it is very much needed in our world. We also address the subject of needing to be kind because God commanded it. And remember, one of the greatest pleasures that we have in our Christian life is pleasing God. We live to please God. When we think about our relationship one with another, we do everything we can to keep our human earthly relationships in harmony, balanced, synchronized with love, and we do that through the kindness that we have for one another. When we think about the fact that being kind because God commanded it, and our desire to please God, our desire to please God is free. It doesn't cost us anything. Just the love for him and doing what we need to keep God pleased. It doesn't require any special equipment or extensive training, just a little consideration. Consider one another. Be considerate of one another to stir up love and good spirit. There will always be reasons that we could find to withhold kindness. Just human nature. We're busy. I'm tired. I don't feel like it right now. We may even think about the other person and say they're just not deserving of it today or right now at this moment. So we do these things because God commands it. We also be kind to one another because gratitude demands it. John, the apostle of love, explained the basis of Christian charity in this way. In 1 John 4:19, he says, we love him because he first loved us. Absolutely. And he loved us even before we knew ourselves. He loved us in spite of what he already knew we would do, good or bad, indifferent or otherwise in life. God loves us. Is there ever a time when God doesn't love us? Even when we're bad? I look around and I see parents in this audience. I see grandparents in this audience. And we can all look back at our children and growing up. And they were not always perfect little kiddies, were they? But it never stopped us from loving them. And I'm sure that they echoed through life as they became adults with families of their own. I remember my mama used to say, this hurts me more than it does you. Now, you and I knew better than that then. It couldn't have hurt me as much as it hurt her. But it hurt our parents because of what? We didn't please them with our behavior. And if you love someone, you live to please them. We're kind because gratitude demands it. We left off at this point last week, and we said, be kind because you will like yourself more. I think I asked you to think about that over the week. Anyone think about being kind because you will like yourself more? Think about when you did something wrong and you hid it or concealed it from your parents. Now, how well did you sleep that night? Probably not very good at all, did you? And if you had opened up, fessed up to it, you liked yourself a whole lot more at that moment, and you'd have slept better. What do we call that? Going to sleep with a what? A guilty conscience. So a conscience is a good thing, but you've got to have right behavior in order for it not to, let's see, what was the word Michael used in the sermon? Be distracted in trying to sleep. Be distracted in trying to sleep. So be kind because you will like yourself more. It's hard to put a price tag on self-respect. What would you pay to feel great about yourself every day? Okay, well, we feel good about ourselves every day, don't we? Every day, all day, for all of our lives. If you were having a bad day, what would you do to turn it around? Well, first of all, we mentioned the fact that prayer is always a great avenue to take. I mean, talking to God, you just can't go wrong. So when we think about that, what would I pay to feel great about myself every day? What would it be worth to rid yourself of that nagging conscience that disapproves? How much would a great night's sleep be worth to you? And how would you like to look at your face in the mirror and smile from ear to ear? Well, the more you're in control of your emotions and your speech, the more you like yourself. Be careful what we allow to come into our heart and come out of our mouths. Those are the things that tend to take us down. The less you control your impulses, the lower your self-respect. The less you control those bad things about being human, the lower self-respect you're going to have. Consideration helps you to exercise more control over your life. Consideration liberates us from selfishness so you can become who you want to be, and so you can become who God wants you to be. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 1. And it allows you to anticipate the consequences of your actions. And we've talked about that over the recent weeks. We consider the consequences of our actions, but sometime in our humanness, we just do what? Slip up, mess up. And now you got to go back and figure out how to fix it up. And that means that we've got to humble ourselves at some point, don't we? Especially when we've hurt or offended someone else. We've got to humble ourselves and go to that person now and be considerate so that we can stir up love and renew a good spirit. Yes, Peggy. The Bible says the way you think it, so are you. Peggy says the Bible teaches the way you think, so are you. What we allow to originate in our heart, and especially if we don't control it and keep it in there, it's going to impact someone or another. Immature people are inconsiderate. We talk about, and I always like it when we can take points from Michael's message in the morning and bring it into our discussion. Immature people are inconsiderate. When we go back to Galatians 5 and 1 and the fact that we're liberated from selfishness so that we can be who God wants us to be. When we strive to be that person, it allows you to anticipate the consequences of your actions and become a caring person and create a kinder world. But because there's so much immaturity among people in our world, so much selfishness, so much of a lack of consideration for others, that spiritually mature people kind of get lost in the shadow. Spiritually mature people are thoughtful and kind. And when we demonstrate who we are, other people see that. And other people are glad to have you in their world. Sympathy for others expands your mind and extends your influence. Self-control. Self-control protects your relationships and refines your soul. It defines to those around you who you are. And it helps them to have the determination, I like being around that person because that person is such a considerate person. And that's how we all want to be viewed. It makes you appealing to others, and it also keeps us at peace with ourselves. We need to be kind because it will improve your health. And I'm sure that there are plenty of you in this room that can attest to that. I may not be a doctor or physician, and like many of you, I read, and many books I come across proclaim the fact that health benefits are a product of good relationships. One thing that I've never seen in print is someone arguing that kindness is detrimental to your health. I've never heard anybody say that. Kindness is positive and good for both your physical and mental health. Most doctors agree that there's a correlation between good relationships and good physical and psychological health. And your body will thank you for becoming a more calm person, for being a more considerate person, because you're not subjecting your body to the daily stresses of life. And that over time takes toll. Let me share this with you. And I said that I'm not a doctor, but like you, I can read. And I remember the times that maybe even I was under stress because of conflict with someone and couldn't sleep. Does that sound familiar to you? And after a couple of days, you find yourself with some ailment, aching somewhere, or even loss of sleep and just being tired. And after a couple of days, you just say, okay, I think I know what's doing this. Well, since, the fact that we know we control the things that we subject ourselves to, and we don't necessarily have to do that. In Proverbs chapter 17, verse 22, the wise man Solomon said this: a joyful heart is good medicine. A happy person has a joyful heart, and that's good medicine. Anybody at any time can be struck by illness, but the general rule is the happier you are, the more healthy you are. And that's why the key to well-being is learning to relate well with others. We know that most episodes of unhappiness in a life can be traced to a difficult relationship with someone. And other than physical ailments, the greatest source of pain is a failed relationship. Be kind because it will improve your health. Another reason to be kind, because it will help get you ahead. Think about your role on your jobs. Whether you are a manager, a supervisor, and even the subordinate employee, being kind helps you to be recognized by those who manage you and supervise you. It also gets you recognized to do what? To promote and to advance because of your kindness. In business, the ability to get along with others is fundamental to meeting your career goals. In the long term, the manners that you learn from your mother and father will help serve you better than any degree or certification that you get. Wise employers value workers with strong people skills. They recognize that etiquette and courtesy are not just nice, but they are essential to building healthy teams that produce results. I'm probably going to talk about this maybe before the end of the session, but it just makes you think about, have you ever been the victim in a hostile workplace where it's just constant stress and you just don't want to be there? And when you are there, you really don't effectively produce, do you? Because you just don't want to be there. So if we're kind, in spite of the circumstances that we may be subjected to, people will notice that. I think I mentioned a circumstance even on my own job. I was ready to give up. I had had enough of it. And then one of my people said, "Sir, everybody is aware of what's going on with you and the boss, but people are looking to you to do the right thing." Not that I was doing wrong, but they looked to me not to give up, and they looked to me to continue to be their leader. So the kindness, I would say, that I reflect to them, they see it and help it reflect it back to me and get through a difficult time with a boss who just doesn't seem to know or like or enjoy kindness. As a matter of fact, I think this person's nickname was Thunder, and Thunder's reputation was to intimidate people. When that happens, employees are not productive. They call in sick. They try to get vacations as long as they can. So you've got to be kind in the workplace, whether you're the boss, the manager, or the subordinate. Be kind because it will help you to get ahead. Yes, sir.
I have a question for you. When there's a toxic at your workplace, um, you made a statement saying you don't want to be there, so you're not going to produce. Well, you should produce, because if you don't produce, you're sinning, because the good book says that whatever you do in word and deed, you do it for God.
Okay.
So, I mean, I understand that workplaces are toxic. They're everywhere out there, but I still produce because I'm not doing it for my boss.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing it for the other employees there. I do it for God.
Good point. Absolutely. And also, you're there to accomplish your job, your duties, and the end result of that is what? Paycheck.
Well, that's all. I mean, that's all that I'm there for.
Yeah.
Give a little bit of money, but as long as I'm there, the other people can be useless to me, can be worthless, but I do it for God.
And a good point there, Kenny, is this. Um, you know, I guess, and my thought may have rolled a little bit, but I think that by being that good example, you're saying to the people who work with you, who work for you, that the road is not always smooth,
They want me to go down their level.
right? And you don't do that,
Right. They don't want to come up with my level.
okay? And you know, that attitude actually goes around to what? Others around you, because they look and say, okay, I can relate to what he's going through. And the next time I'm in that position, I'm going to do what? I'm going to respond better. I guess the thought that I wanted to say was simply that I may not can control how I'm being treated, but what's the one thing that I can control? My response to it. Absolutely. My response to it. And that can just carry so much in the sight of those who are watching you. And by the way, they know that you're more than just their coworker. They know that you're more than just their supervisor or their manager. If they see the glory of God reflected in your life, then that also says something else to them. Okay? So remember who you are, even under those difficult circumstances. And I think too, along with that, I may not stay there forever. And when I do leave, I want to make sure that I leave with a good reputation and not necessarily um, with the response to the bad workplace environment. I'm going to do my job and hope that somewhere in documentation as I go along and with people that are references, that they will simply say that you weren't the problem when talking to the prospective new employer, that you weren't the problem, but you did a very good job in responding to the problem. People will notice those things and remember that. Yes,
And then they can say, I really missed her, I miss her, and now I really miss him.
absolutely.
That's what they can say.
Absolutely. I know my wife said to me when I took a new job, and she said, "You're not going to like it there." And I said, "Why?" She said, "They're not ready for you." In other words, I came in as a fixer to fix all the problems in the organization. And that was what my boss and his boss asked for: your reputation for managing people in a good and kind way and making them more productive. So that was one reason I went there. And it was a challenge. It was a challenge. And by the way, when your people, not necessarily those who are at the bottom of the line as the producers, but midway between them, supervision, mid-management, when they conspire to try to destroy you because they want things to go back as they were, your hands are full. Okay. And I think I remember my first staff meeting with this group. I actually used the wise words of Proverbs, I think chapter 6 or 7. You know, the 7 things that God hates. I used that as my agenda for my staff meeting. And they didn't have a clue. But that got me through the staff meeting. And it got me to implement the changes that were needed as to who was supervising who and all of that. And afterward, one guy said to me, he said, "Sir, that sounded sure familiar." And I said, "When you get back to your desk, I know you have a Bible. Open it up to Proverbs and read this." And he called back and said, "I knew that was familiar, sir." So sometimes people are just what? Selfish and not considerate of others. And as the boss, as the supervisor, the manager, you have to learn to manage those things. You know, we should never fear being nice. You know, sometimes we have the feeling that being nice will hamper our environment or our advancement in the workplace. But the genuinely considerate person has a broader, more enduring base of support than those who rely on intimidation. And when you are that kinder person, you'll see more people side with you than they will with the person who's toxic. Humble people are good people, but humble people don't have to be doormats, do they? And remember that. Humble people do not have to be doormats. Being courteous doesn't mean you can't be appropriately assertive. Thinking before acting and choosing a fitting and appropriate response, these things demonstrate strength of character. And those of you who particularly have been in roles of management, leadership on your jobs know that this is actually, it is just so true. And those who are in control of their mouths, those who are in control of their emotions, are more likely to advance than those who are inconsiderate. Being a nice person cannot substitute for technical competencies, but a good work ethic, an innovative spirit. All things being equal, it can be the difference in making your life, your career, much easier. Be kind because it will help you get ahead. Be kind because it will be returned in kind. According to the Apostle Paul in Galatians chapter 6, verse 7 through 10, he tells us that whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap. And the spiritual principle of reciprocity works on relationships as well as morally. And that means that God wired people to respond to you in keeping with how you treat them. If you yell, they'll yell back at you, won't they? It's a natural response. Think about children and even adults. If you punch them in the nose, they're going to start swinging. It's just simple human response. But if you smile, most people instinctively return a smile. When you show kindness, it will typically be repaid. When you send someone a card, they may respond in kind. When you open a door for others, they often hold the next door for you. And sure, these may seem like little things, but the conclusion is clear. Life is generally more pleasant when you are pleasant. The disposition that you give to others is often what's mirrored back to you. So, in closing out the being kind in consideration to one another, what is clear is that there are benefits for showing kindness and cost for ignoring the human need. Every day you grow more considerate or you grow more callous. Insensitivity is not a normal condition. It's not human to see another's pain without your own heart hurting. But the heart can grow hard if its promptings are repeatedly denied. By thinking more of yourself and less of others, you quiet your conscience and you limit your capacity to show empathy to others. Preoccupation with self is the death of the spirit. When love dies, the soul dies with it. When love dies, the soul dies with it. When love grows, the soul revives. Consideration quickens the spirit. Moral feelings are heightened, and the imagination is awakened to its most noble purpose. Sanctification begins with consideration, and consideration begins with awareness. The more I empathize with others, the more respectful and the more responsive I am to their needs. You see, Christianity promotes an active interest in the welfare of others. Christianity promotes an active interest in the welfare and the well-being of others. It demands higher levels of thoughtfulness and responsibility than what's common in society. Being considerate requires that grace and goodness triumph over apathy, not being concerned for others and ill will. It is the long-term relational thinking over short-term selfish thinking. But what does consideration look like on a practical level? How does the attitude translate into action? As we move over, I want you to remember this. What did John say in 1 John 4:19? Why did John say we should love? Because he first loved us. Last week we mentioned, what about the fact that what did Solomon say is good medicine? A cheerful heart is good medicine. What does consideration free you from? Galatians 5:1 tells us it frees us from sin and selfishness. Whatever holds me back from being my best is a burden that I don't need to have. It's a weight that I shouldn't put upon me. And according to Paul in Galatians 6:7-10, what can a person expect to reap in life? Simple. Whatever he sows, you will also reap. Okay? Let's see. I'm going to move to the next one. I think that's right. Don't wait. That's okay. I'll stay with it. In consideration for this block, we want to talk about being friendly. The author of this quote is unknown, but it says simply this: don't wait for people to be friendly. Show them how. Don't wait for people to be friendly. Show them how. Proverbs teaches us that if a man is to have friends, he must do what? He must be a friend first. If a man is to have friends, he must show himself to be friendly. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Matthew chapter 26, verse 41, Jesus told his disciples to watch and pray. So what was Jesus really saying to them when he said to watch and pray? Jesus is simply saying, pay attention. Pay attention to the world around you. Pay attention to the people around you. And remember, when this happened, when Jesus returned, what did he find? He found the disciples doing what? Sleeping. He found them sleeping. Peter, James, and John. And they had missed during their napping a chance to comfort Jesus in his hour of need. They weren't really paying attention at that point as to what Jesus was going through. Now, I wonder, though, if we're dozing when it comes to occasions to serve him by encouraging others. How many times in our own lives, in our own daily activities, do we overlook opportunities to help other people in their hour or time of need? Think about the newcomer to the congregation who's looking for a friendly face, or that long-time member who's aged a little bit and may even need help just getting up the steps from the vestibule or in the parking lot just to get here. How many times do we overlook opportunities to help people, no matter how big or small? In the book by M. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled, the principal form of the work of love takes attention. It says, Life's best moments are the times when we momentarily lose ourselves in caring for another. But before you can be considerate, you must first be conscious of consideration. Before you can help others, you've got to understand in your own consciousness. And this was the very first word that we talked about several weeks ago. We've got to understand empathy. And we've got to know we must care for the needs of other people. Changing our behavior requires changing the focus of our attention. Again, back to the point that Michael addressed in his message this morning. Kindness is preceded by caring, but you cannot care for someone you do not even bother to notice. Have you ever been made to feel invisible? Not a good feeling, is it? Everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to be recognized. And in our very nature as human, we long to be what? Loved. And love, expressions of love comes in so many ways. It's not always the big things. Sometimes it's just the little things. We must change our behavior if we're going to recognize that kindness is preceded by caring. Nor can you engage in good works without imagining the suffering of the one that you're hoping to help, the one that you're hoping to give some consideration to. Your first responsibility as a Christian is to turn your heart toward God by sensing the needs of those around you. Matthew 25 and verse 40. Loving humanity is heaven's cure for earth's vanity. Let me say that again. Loving humanity is heaven's cure for earth's vanity. We must love our neighbors as whom? As ourselves. The golden rule. Treat others the way you yourself desire to be treated. Yes.
You've got to look at yourself. You're not going to help change nobody if you don't change yourself first.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's your whole being.
Absolutely.
Whole being.
Absolutely. You've got to look at yourself, and whatever is holding you back, you've got to fix that. If you are going to help to alleviate the pain of others in this world that we're living in. The essence of love is broadening your attention to care for those that God brings into your presence. When you're watching your favorite football team and you hear the baby cry, you stop and you rush to go cradle that child in your arms. That's love. When your mate wants spaghetti and you prefer fajitas, but you opt for Italian anyway, that's love. Self-denial in small things helps you to grow the spiritual muscle necessary for Christ-like love. And this takes practice. It doesn't just happen. It takes practice to have healthy relationships. To make room for someone in your life, you must first make room for that person in your heart. If you can't let them in your heart, then your roadblock is there. You won't get any farther. The essence of marriage, the essence of parenting, the essence of friendship is giving others your attention. Giving others your attention. The basis of ministry and shepherding is less concerned with self and more concerned for others. Whether you're at home, work, or play, you can't be your best without social awareness. And people who are oblivious to this have no concern for other people. They just don't get it. They're unaware of the way that their words and deeds hurt others, and they're insensitive to the struggles of those around them. Moreover, they don't have the inducement to change because they miss, either consciously or unconsciously, overlook the subtle cues that manful people recognize. Kindness. Kindness is contingent on the awakening of your conscience. When you see others' needs and sense your responsibility, wonderful things follow that. When you ignore people's pain and deny your accountability, wicked things happen. Satan is at work, and he has found a weakness, sadly, in you. History's worst injuries and atrocities resulted from a combination of indifference and inattention. Apathy and insensitivity are responsible for most of the problems in our world. Apathy and insensitivity, just not caring, and it's not my problem. Those are responsible for most of the world's problems. Heartlessness is dangerous to you and demeaning to others. Jesus illustrated the spiritual problem in the parable of the sower. When the heart is unfruitful, the problem is inattention. Hard-heartedness is to God's word what hard ground is to seed. It is a barrier to growth. Our hard-heartedness is a barrier to us growing to be what God wants us and needs us to be in his world, as his tools and as his instruments to make a difference on his behalf. It was the sin of the rich man who overlooked the beggar at the gate, Luke chapter 16. It is closing your eyes to someone's trouble when you could help if only you cared. And we'll end with this, 1 John 3:17. If anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but rather in deed and in truth. Next week, Lord willing, we'll continue with being friendly, and we'll start with the subject of be friendly, greet one another. On that note, we're dismissed. Greet one another. Thank you.